The Bruins lose again, and could John Tortorella be on their radar as their next head coach?
You're Locked On Bruins, your daily podcast on the Boston Bruins. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, Bruins fans, and welcome back to the Locked On Boston Bruins podcast. I'm your host, Ian McLaren, and this is a daily show where we discuss all things Spoked B. Today is Thursday, March 27th. Thank you so much for making Locked On Bruins part of your day, free and available on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today on the podcast, we are going to discuss the latest loss to the Anaheim Ducks, a 6-2 decision last night in California. The Bruins' seventh loss in a row, their longest losing streak in 25 years. Also, there's breaking news this morning that John Tortorella has been let go by the Philadelphia Flyers. Could he be a candidate to replace interim head coach Joe Sacco? Before we get into all that, quick reminder, you can find the podcast on social media at Locked NHL Bruins. You can find me, my hockey thoughts, dad jokes at Ian C. McLaren. I am a lifelong Boston Bruins fan. Been covering this team for various outlets since 2005. I was a hockey news editor for The Score up here in Toronto for 5 years, and I've been hosting this podcast since 2019. And we have not seen a losing streak like this in that time. And those of you who have been listening, you know that I am kind of endorsing this mini tank here so that the Bruins can maximize their draft lottery potential and also hopefully turn things around pretty quickly here in the offseason. Part of that, I believe, will be the replacement of interim head coach Joe Sacco, who has stepped in and taken over in very tough circumstances, having to replace Jim Montgomery, who was a record-setting Jack Adams winning coach for this team, having lost some key players due to injury along the way. Now, having gone through the trade deadline where multiple pieces were subtracted from the roster, trying to integrate some new guys in, see what they have. A tough spot for him to be in for sure. And it will likely result in the Bruins management, Don Sweeney, team president Cam Neely, looking elsewhere for their next head coach, which would be the third head coach hired by the Boston Bruins during Don Sweeney's tenure, I should add. Very rarely, we've said many times, do general managers get the opportunity to hire more than two head coaches. I think the average is like 2.3 last time I checked, meaning it's incredibly rare that you get the opportunity to hire three head coaches. So if they make the wrong move here and things don't turn around early next season, it's really Sweeney's job that will be on the line. Now, one candidate has emerged in Philadelphia where John Tortorella was let go this morning, just a couple days after he said he was not really interested in learning how to coach in this type of season. That was said 2 days ago after the Flyers lost 7-2 to the Toronto Maple Leafs. Similar score line to what we've seen many times here this season for the Bruins. It was Philly's sixth straight loss and kept them below the Bruins in the standings here. We'll update the Tank Watch later on. He said, when you're in this type of situation and you're losing all the time and there's nothing at the end of the tunnel for you, there's certainly going to be some frustration. But this falls on me, he said. I'm not really interested in learning how to coach this type of season, where we're at right now. But I have to do a better job, so this falls on me, getting the team prepared to play the proper way until we get to the end. End quote. Now, the Flyers, they rank 9th in the Eastern Conference. They haven't been eliminated from the playoffs, but it's going to happen. And this team has not made the playoffs in quite some time. They're John Tortorella as head coach, 237 games, a record of 97, 107, and 33, a 479 point percentage for a team that has been admittedly going through some rebuild and growing pains here over the last little bit, and it hasn't really paid off. Tortorella was brought in a few years ago to try to build on some young guys that had been brought in for rebuild. Some top picks like Morgan Frost, Joel Farabee, who have since been traded. He's regularly scratched young players, including Matvei Michkov. This team has not made the playoffs since 2020, finishing 6th, 8th, 7th, and they're currently 6th last year in the Metropolitan Division. So why would the Bruins possibly be interested in John Tortorella? Well, you just have to look at where he was born. For one thing, he's a Boston native. He does have 2 Jack Adams Awards to his credit. He's also won a Stanley Cup with the Tampa Bay Lightning, although that was 21 years ago now. He does have a career regular season coaching record of 770, 648, and 37, with 165 overtime losses as well, a 538 point percentage. He's been to the playoffs with the Lightning, the Columbus Blue Jackets, the Rangers. He was only able to succeed really with Tampa Bay, winning that one Stanley Cup championship in 2004 with that core of like Martin St. Louis, Vincent Lecavalier, Brad Richards, Dave Andreychuk was part of that team. So it's been quite some time since he was successful. But of course, his coaching style may be what Don Sweeney is looking for. He, of course, is very abrasive, brash, in-your-face kind of coach. And he talked last season about pushing buttons among young players and how he kind of bumps up against them. He scratched Morgan Frost quite frequently. He's tried to get the best out of Farabee, Tyson Forster, Jamie Drysdale. He said last season, if I have to coach differently now, especially with the younger players than back in the day, I have to do that, he said. It's a different athlete today than when he won the cup. Coaches need to respect that and not fight it. But he said there's some things I struggle with athletes. Dead against sometimes how they act, how they think. Got to find a middle road to coach them, how I treat them, how the conversations go. It's incumbent upon coaches to do that. He's very demanding, of course. He tries to make sure players are defensively responsible. You have to make sure that they're playing the right way, that they are receptive to holding them accountable, and of course preaches a really defensively minded, solid game where, Michkov tried to do the Michigan a couple times this season. He didn't seem to be too big of a fan of that. So he would be a guy who comes in, holds players accountable, and preaches kind of that team first mentality. Is that what the Bruins need? Is that what the Bruins want? Personally, I think there's probably better options more suited to today's game. I think that perhaps they might wait to see what happens with Mike Sullivan in Pittsburgh. If they could bring him in and also, you have Sullivan established as head coach. You name his son-in-law as captain, and those two kind of take things on as a family business. I'm not a huge fan of getting John Tortorella in the mix here, but he could be a guy that Don Sweeney eyes as someone to try to right the ship here for the Boston Bruins. The way that he went out in Philly shows that he's not interested in going through a rebuild, which could be what the Bruins, that kind of attitude that they want. They don't want to. They want this to be a quick turnaround as well. But perhaps at this stage, Tortorella is best suited for analyst role than a head coaching role. So I'm not super into it, but it's certainly something that I wouldn't put it past Don Sweeney and Cam Neely to entertain, especially after how the team has been playing lately. But if you're expecting wins, as we'll discuss here in a moment, then you're watching the wrong team right now. So let's break down the loss to the Anaheim Ducks, the stories, stats, and signals to take away here, and also update the tankathon here as the podcast continues. If you're like me, you cannot start your day without the best possible cup of coffee. In fact, I'm ready for my second one here in a moment. I got tired of settling for grocery store brands that just weren't cutting it, and that's why I turned to Trade. Let me tell you, their coffee is next level. Trade is the number one specialty coffee marketplace in the U.S., bringing you fresh coffee from over 50 of the country's top roasters. Their experts have tested thousands of coffees, curating over 450 amazing roasts. If you're new to coffee or know exactly what you like, they'll handpick the perfect match for you. My first bag was a game changer. It had such a smooth, rich flavor, and I could actually taste the difference from my usual coffee. And the subscription makes it so easy. No more last-minute grocery store runs or settling for whatever is on the shelf. Right now, Trade is exclusively offering our listeners 40% off your first order at drinktrade.com/lockedonnhl. That's drinktrade.com/lockedonnhl for 40% off your first order. Visit drinktrade.com today and use code LOCKEDONNHL for 40% off your first order. All right, so the Boston Bruins last night losing 6-2 to the Anaheim Ducks, a team that's pretty level with them in terms of the standings. And when we're talking about improving draft position, it's a good result for the Bruins, but the way that they continue to lose in very lopsided fashion isn't inspiring a ton of confidence for the future. We had goals from Morgan Geekie, who also had an assist. David Pastrnak scored. Joonas Korpisalo made 31 saves. And the Bruins are now winless in 7 straight games for the first time since a 10-game skid from January 16th to February 6th, 2010, where they went 0-6-4. Head coach Joe Sacco said it's frustrating time right now. When you get down a few goals like we do, you try to play catch-up hockey, and you open yourself up for more mistakes. That's the problem right now. Now, the Bruins were incredibly shorthanded. If you're looking at this lineup and expecting different results, well, you're looking at the wrong thing here. Look at their defense especially. They had a top pairing last night of Parker Wotherspoon and Henry Jokiharju. Second pairing of Mason Lohrei, Andrew Peeke, Mike Callahan, and Ian Mitchell as the third pair. That's one guy who's been here for just a few weeks, less than a few weeks. Two guys on the third pair who should be in the AHL. Witherspoon, who's normally the 7th defenseman. Lohrei and Peeke were the third pair to begin the season, so very depleted on the back end with McAvoy injured, Hampus Lindholm injured, and Nikita Zadorov heading back to Boston to attend to a family matter, which we hope is nothing serious. You also have up front Huzi, who's only been here for a few weeks, playing on the top line right now with Middlestat and Pastrnak. A whole new trio there that's looking to find some chemistry. Fabian Lysell up playing on the second line with Morgan Geekie and Pavel Zacha. Lettieri, Patrick Brown, Cole Koepke, all guys who could be down in Providence right now. John Beecher, Jacob Lauko, Elias Lindholm. It's not a very deep lineup at all. And there's a bunch of guys who could be in the AHL right now. So, once those decisions were made at the trade deadline, you could see how the Bruins were kind of waving the white flag on this season and looking to regroup for next year. So, expecting anything different right now would be misguided. David Pastrnak said, "We have 9 games left. Still need to build something in this group and be connected." But right now, they're looking at next season, really, and who might stick around for what we hope will be a quick turnaround. Again, Zadorov did not play because of a family matter. And Pastrnak, for his part, was a -5 on the night if you're looking at those kind of things. And we'll look at the stats here in a moment, as well as some signals to take away. But the big storyline is, if you're looking to improve your draft standing, then it was a win for the Boston Bruins, because Anaheim's a team that is fairly close to you in the standings, and letting them take the 2 points and move ahead isn't necessarily the worst thing. Now, the Bruins, what's discouraging is 5 shots in the first period, 4 shots in the second period. There's a good way to lose and a bad way to lose. And kind of tanking with a purpose requires some positive steps taken forward, but in the end, you get that losing result, right? You don't want the team to be just demolished each and every night. A, it's not fun for us to watch, and B, you're potentially harming morale or causing some rifts among the players or guys who are not seeing the bigger picture and don't want to be part of it. And that could lead to some bigger changes in the offseason. You did have 3 shots on goal from Fabian Lysell, which was, or 2 shots from him, 3 shots from Jacob Lauko. You had David Pastrnak, Orjan Geekie, Pavel Zacha continuing to produce. Those are guys that you're going to want to build around come next season, of course, as a line that we have seen be very effective. Anaheim took both games of the season series. And again, in the bigger picture, that's not a bad thing, because it improves Boston's chances of getting a better draft pick. And that's just where we're at right now. If you're upset with all the losses, if you're disgusted with this team right now, just look at the lineup they're putting out there. It's not a team that is designed to put up W's. It's not the same team that we had earlier this season. That was really disappointing. If you want to get upset at some of these guys, then look at the guys who were traded away. Look at the lineup that was intact earlier this season that just did not get it done. And there's the core players of Jeremy Swayman, who's still not getting it done. There's Charlie McAvoy, who's injured. David Pastrnak, who's doing everything he can to help this team succeed night in and night out. And that's who you're going to build around, hopefully with a top pick in tow. Now, the Bruins are now tied for the 3rd fewest points in the East with Pittsburgh. Philadelphia is 4 points behind, and Buffalo is only 5 points behind with 3 games in hand. So it's quite possible that Buffalo, who won 2 in a row, could pass the Bruins at some point. With the win last night, Anaheim moved to 70 points, so 1 ahead of the Bruins, and those are all kind of positive things here. Let's look at a couple more stats here that I thought were interesting from last night's game. Boston's most effective line last night, if you can believe it, was John Beecher, Patrick Brown, Jacob Lauko. They were on the ice for 9 minutes and 27 seconds at 5-on-5, generated 19 shot attempts, allowed only 4, and shots were 10-2 in that time. So a very good showing from the fourth line in that one. The line of Pavel Zacha, Morgan Geekie, Fabian Lysell, an even 10-10 in 8 minutes and 31 seconds of 5-on-5 ice time. They allowed one more shot than they produced. The line of Kuznetsov, Middlestat, and Pasternak not as effective. 8 minutes and 24 seconds of ice time. They generated 2 shot attempts and allowed 11. And they had 1 shot for, 4 against, and allowed, they were on for 1 goal against. So a very poor showing for that trio. Anaheim last night scoring, 6 goals on the Bruins. And they had a shorthanded goal to open the game from Leo Carlsson. They had a couple goals in the third period. Leo Carlsson, Mason McTavish. Just not the best defensive night for the Boston Bruins at all. And of course, that came from the Bruins having a very, very depleted defense core, which isn't going to help anybody. So that's kind of the story from last night's game. Again, it's not super worth reading too much into these games because this is not the lineup that we want. It's not the lineup we expect to be there next season. And hopefully they have a pretty decent draft pick that might be able to jump into the lineup. We'll take a look at some signals to take away from this game, as well as the Tankathon update here as the podcast continues. If you're looking to hire someone like right away, yesterday, in fact, there's no better place to turn than Indeed. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other sites. Indeed's sponsored jobs put your post at the top of the page and help you reach the right candidates faster. I've been in that spot where you need the right hire ASAP. The pressure's on every day without the right person is a setback. That's when Indeed's sponsored jobs come in handy. They make sure your post is seen by the right candidates right now. Speed up your hiring process with that $75 sponsored job credit. Just go to Indeed.com/lockedon right now. Support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply. If you're hiring, all you need is Indeed. All right, the Bruins are experimenting with some lines, trying to see who can be most effective. We know that there's some guys down in the AHL who probably should be up right now, like a Matt Poitras, a Georgi Merkulov. The Bruins purposely going with Vinny Lettieri, Patrick Brown, Cole Koepke in the interest of not perhaps exposing those guys to some pretty bad hockey right now, but also to give them more experience down on the farm and not maybe put the best possible lineup together for the Boston Bruins. Now, if you're looking at some positive things to take away, I mentioned Lysell's 2 shots there, and the fact that he did have a pretty nice rush into the zone, a backhand shot that almost trickled in. Some good signs from him. I don't think he's just a token call up. I think he's a guy that they want to see if he can hang at the NHL level, and he's proving that he indeed does have the legs, at least. The defensive game needs to work, of course. Maybe some of the physicality, holding his own against bigger defensemen, but I don't think he's a bust by any stretch of the imagination. He's only 22, and hopefully he is in the opening night lineup next season feeling pretty confident and ready to hit the ground running. Some other guys, mixed results so far. Huzi, the Middlestat Pasternak line did not work. Again, they're just trying to mix things up and see what could work for next season if they can split up that top line that's been working. So far, no. But again, the Bruins will have a ton of cap space to work with in the offseason and hopefully can add some impact players to offset the load being carried by David Pastrnak, maybe a Mitch Marner or a Nikolai Ehlers from Winnipeg. Those would be obviously the top two candidates, and we'll discuss that more here in future episodes. For right now, we're going to do our daily running of the draft simulation for the first overall pick. You see the Bruins currently have the 8th best chance of getting the first overall pick. Didn't really change much after last night, but Anaheim picking up those 2 points solidified the Bruins further in that spot. 6% chance of getting the first overall pick, 6.2 chance of getting the second overall pick, 54.4 chance of getting 8, 30% chance of getting 9. So a couple days ago we ran it. They got first twice, defying those odds. Yesterday it was like 8th, 9th, and 10th. Let's see what happens when we run it here today. Sim lottery, be friendly to the Boston Bruins because could use a bit of a break here. First running, sticking in 8th. Chicago moved up a bit. Buffalo with the big jump. San Jose falling from 1st to 3rd. That would be a bummer for them to be sure. Second running, Bruins drop down 1 to 9th. That would be not ideal at all. Let's run it one more time. Philly, after firing head coach John Tortorella, they jump up, get the first overall pick. Buffalo moves up 3 spots to get number 2. That would really defy the odds. Both of those teams jumping up. The Bruins sticking in 8th. So we've got 8th, 9th, and 8th. Here they drop down to 9th with Detroit making a huge jump up to the first overall pick, jumping up 9 spots. What luck for them. So we got 8th, 9th, 8th, 9th. Will the final running give us some more luck? Whoa, yeah, that's a bit better, eh? Jumping up 6 spots to number 2. That would be fantastic. That would give them an opportunity to draft Misa, Higgins. That's exactly what this team needs and would be the perfect end to a very difficult and disappointing season for the Boston Bruins. But let's not kid ourselves here, friends. The expectations at this point in the season are not what they were earlier. The expectation now is to ride out the regular season, put your best foot forward, be a professional, kind of buy into the bigger picture long-term plan. Although that's difficult, like I mentioned the other day, for guys who maybe won't be here next season or maybe a top pick would put them out of a job. But you're a professional hockey player. You're being paid to get out there, put it all on the line, and hopefully there's some at least entertaining moments along the way here for the Boston Bruins. That is it for today's episode. My friends, thank you so much for taking the time to listen. Please do subscribe on your favorite podcast app or on YouTube if you have not already. On tomorrow's podcast, we'll bring you all the latest on the Black and Gold, preview Saturday's game against the Detroit Red Wings. And please do take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and we'll talk to you again here on the next episode of Locked On Boston Bruins, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your favorite team every single day.